Well, let's just get right to it. Hear this story. It's a familiar one, but I hope you hear it in a different way today. And I hope it speaks to your spirit as it has spoken to mine. Jesus calms the storm. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He stood up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified, and they asked each other, "Who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, and this is an antique question. Why do I say it's an antique question? Because I remember hearing this question when I was about 4, and I know it was around a lot longer before me, all right? Why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. There you go. Now, I don't even want to pretend that you will understand why, when I read this passage, why that question came into my mind. But what did come to mind was this. Why did Jesus and his disciples get in the boat? To go to the other side. And I can't just leave it there. I mean, okay, let's look at it literally. They got on a boat, they got caught in a storm, it was very scary. Jesus calmed everything down, and they made it to the other side okay. Isn't that a wonderful story, boys and girls? But how does that affect your life in any way? So, you know me, I've got to see the symbolic in it as well. It seems to me that at any point in our life when we choose to deepen our spirituality, whenever we want to choose to build our character, or sometimes it's not a choice, but when we're open to having a deeper understanding what it means to be a human being created in the image of God, we have to go through a stormy period to do it. You have to be willing to at least get in the boat and take the trip before you can make the discoveries that you want to make. And it doesn't mean that when you're on these discoveries, it always goes smoothly. In fact, most of the time, it does not. So you find yourself in one of those, oh my God, situations, right? Why am I here? What am I doing here? I remember when I was in high school, 10th grade, I lived in Albany, Georgia. Now, that's spelled like A-L-B-A-N-Y. But I learned when I was there that Albany was in New York and Albany is in Georgia. And Karen wasn't Karen, she was Karen, all right? So it took me a while to understand the language when I got there. They take football very seriously there. And we had 2-a-day practices, which for anybody here who's been in football or in Florida, you know what I mean. But here in Florida, you go to practice at 8 a.m., you practice till about 11, you come home, you crash, you die for a little bit, go back at 1, and stay till about 3, and then you come home and you crash and you die, and you do that for 2 weeks. There, you don't come home. You arrive on Sunday night, and you stay in the gym. They feed you all 3 of your meals each day. Everything is there. You come home on Friday night, stay Saturday, Sunday night, you return and go for another week. I had just turned 15. There are other boys there who were 17, 18, and if you know, there's a lot of difference between 15-year-olds and 18-year-olds. I was scared out of my wits. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I doing here? But I survived it. I got through it. I showed myself that even though it was extremely scary at first, I was able to get through it. After graduating from college, in my mid-20s, decided it was time to go to seminary. Within the first couple of weeks I was there, I realized, oh my God, what am I doing here? Everything that I had brought there, everything that I had believed in was turned upside down and was in doubt. But after 3 years, I stuck through it. And I learned so much about myself in that situation. In 1992, I decided to leave the SBC. Had a counseling gig all lined up. Little did I know that the Florida State Legislature changed the rules and the laws on licensure for mental health counseling. Then I found myself unemployed for 10 months. Oh my God, what am I doing here? How can this be, you see? But I prevailed. Worked at the Center for Drug-Free Living. Aftercare counselor. I felt pretty confident about my skills and abilities. After a couple of weeks, I realized how much I didn't know and what was at stake. Oh my God, what am I doing here? Those 2 years working with Ken Allison were 2 of the best years of my professional life. I learned so much. I developed so many new skills, so that when the opportunity came to come to Windermere Union Church, I was much more prepared to lead a congregation than I had been before, you see. But I would have never experienced that if I hadn't have what? Got in the boat and taken the journey. Now, I don't share all this with you to say, oh, everybody, look at me and what I share it with you because I'm hoping that as I am recounting the different stages of my own life where I found myself in very uncomfortable experiences trying to get from one place to another in my life, that you will start doing the same for yourselves. It isn't amazing that when we look back, we can see how many times we were out of our comfort zone, how many times it seemed that we were in a foreign land, how many times it seemed that we were in the middle of a big body of water with waves swamping our boat and we don't know how we're going to get through it. But we, what? Do. And it's not unusual for you during these times to feel that you're all alone. One of the things that I learned in seminary was in the Hebrew tradition called the absence of the present God. Especially when you read the Psalms and the Psalms of Lament. You see it all the way through there. People who are saying, God, I've been faithful to you. My family is faithful to you. I follow your laws. I give alms to your temple. And yet my enemies, they chastise me. They thrive and I am struggling. God, where are you? Even Jesus, at the height of his own pain and suffering on the cross, asked a question from a psalm. You remember what he asked? What he said? My God, why have you forsaken me? It's not unusual or a huge human crime for you in your midst, in the peak of your fear and your pain and your suffering, to wonder where God is in the middle of it. But remember this, it may feel that God is absent, but it doesn't mean God is absent. So you have the disciples scolding Jesus, who was asleep in the boat. He was not afraid of the storm. He knew that they were going to make it safely. Do you not care that we're drowning? Wow, that's kind of harsh, isn't it? It's kind of harsh. One of the things that I learned at Phoenix South is there's a difference between drowning with someone who's in trouble and helping them to help themselves. And you have to have some kind of level of objectivity. So because Jesus and God does not want to join you in your crisis doesn't mean they don't care. Because you feel like, oh, I'm drowning and the world's falling apart. And God doesn't join in on that and say, yes, you are drowning and your world is falling apart. Doesn't mean that God doesn't care. Some of you who come to me for counseling and you come to me, Pastor Barton, I don't know what I'm going to do. My whole world's turned upside down. I don't know what's happening in my relationships and my marriage and my job, and and everything is just falling apart, and I'm just crazy, and I'm just can't sleep at night. And I look at you and I smile and say, wonderful, good news. And you look at me like, you're the most evil man on the planet. Because I know, because of experience, that because you're in the middle of this raging storm in your life, you're going to learn something about yourself, and you have to trust that I can help you through. You have to trust when you get in the boat that Jesus is going to get you to the other side, and trust is a big issue. It's a big issue. Trust is not just something you do, it's something usually earned, right? Story of a man and a husband and wife sitting in the couch of the living room. You've probably had this discussion with your spouse. He looked at his wife and he said, just so that you know, I don't ever want to live in a vegetative state. I do not want to be dependent on machines and my body to be dependent upon fluids being pumped into my body. Just want you to know that if I'm ever in a vegetative state, that you will pull the plug. And she looked at him. Her eyes started to well up. She was taking in what he was saying. And a smile came on her face, and she said, "Sweetheart, if I ever see you in a vegetative state, I promise you I will make the hard choice and pull the plug." They smiled at each other. She got up off the couch, unplugged the TV, and threw out all of his beer. That's trust, right? That's trust. And as we trust God, as we jump in the boat and as we trust God, God may not be responding in the way we wanted God to, but I can promise you God will help you get through. Now, here's another thing in the story that I think is pretty amazing. The disciples have been with Jesus for a long time now. They've heard his teaching. They've seen him do his miracles. They've seen him do so much. And yet, when they find themselves in the middle of the storm rocking about in this boat, they question whether or not he even cares that they're going to drown. After Jesus calms the winds, after he calms the waves, what do the disciples ask? Who is this guy? Isn't it amazing that they could have been with Jesus all this time in such an intimate way, and they still didn't have a clue who he was? And we can understand to some degree why there was some confusion here, because it's said in the Hebrew Scriptures that only God had command of the chaos of the seas. And yet Jesus was able to speak to the wind and the waves and bring them calm. Who is this man who can do these things? And for me, this leads on to the next part of the journey of getting in the boat to go see what's on the other side. Whenever we find ourselves in these stormy experiences, it helps us to discover what? Who am I? Right? It's a character building experience, isn't it? Didn't you hate that when you were going through tough times and some adult in your life said, "It's a character experience, building experience. Wow, my world's falling apart." It's a character building experience. You'll get through okay. Oh, they don't understand. Yeah, they do, because they've been through it a million times themselves too. It's when we go through these experiences, we can then ask the question, who am I? Who am I in relationship to this Christ? Who am I in relationship with God? Who am I in relationship to this incredible Spirit who has the power to calm the seas and the winds? Henry Ford once said, "Whether you think you can or you cannot, either way, you're right." Whether you think you can get in the boat and take the risk and take the journey to make these discoveries about who you are and to deepen your spiritual faith and to deepen your character as a human being and your strength and so forth, whether if you think you can, you're right. If you think you cannot and you stay ashore, you're right about that too. The storms that we find ourselves in have a purpose in them. It's just not a random selection by God to say, this person's life has been gone way too well for too long and too smoothly. Let's create some craziness in their lives. If you're going through a challenging time, if you're going through a scary time, find the purpose in what you're going through. It's there. If you ask the question, God will give you the answer. And know that your struggle has purpose. Where do you want to end up at the end of the struggle? Who do you want to be while you're in the struggle? It helps you to discover who you are. Another thing, and this is a challenge for many of you, most of the chaos and the crazy that you experience in your life is not created by God, is not created by society, it's not created by family. Who creates most of the chaos in our lives? Oh, wonderful. So we have wonderful self-awareness today. At least a third of us. Yes. You create a lot of the crazy. And I think that's why God often doesn't jump into your crazy. And that's why God is not terribly concerned. That's why Jesus can sleep in the boat while you're in your crazy, because Jesus not only has the power to calm the crazy in your life, but Jesus wants you to know that what? You have the power to calm the crazy in your life. So why did the chicken cross the road? Oh, you brilliant disciples. Why did Jesus and the disciples get in the boat? Get to the other side. So it's your choice today. Stay on the beach where it's safe, predictable. Put your foot in the boat. Take a chance. Get yourself in that boat with Jesus and go on a journey. It may be smooth sailing. It may be the most scary thing in your whole life. But either way, if you choose to get into this boat and take this journey, you're going to discover more clearly who you are. You're going to see more clearly who Christ is. And you're going to experience more fully the divine presence of God in you and all around you. Thus ends the lesson. Amen. Let us pray. Oh, God. Our fear sometimes blinds us so severely, not only to your presence with us and within us, but we're also blinded by the opportunities all around us. Opportunity for personal growth, opportunities for adventure, opportunities to lead our business to a whole different level because what we're doing is not working, opportunities to manage our team in new and wonderful ways, opportunities all around us to deepen our spiritual lives and to discover what's most important to us. God, help us to see these storms as not a curse, but as a gift from you. And may we always know that we can trust, whether we feel you there or not, that you write it out with us. Because even when we don't know fully what we're made of, you do. And you want us simply to discover what you already know about us.